Hey guys, welcome to another episode of On Air. I am here at Sandy Park today to film an interview with the one and only club legend at Exeter Chiefs, Gareth Steenson, Steeno, and he's going to be joining me in talking about the transition from being a player into becoming kicking coach for the club here at Exeter Chiefs. A really interesting transition where lots of different components come into the challenge across that journey. And we're discussing the leadership at the club and his personal journey and how he intends on approaching that new coaching role inside the club. Stadium's being built, or the new stand of the stadium is being built behind us. You may hear some diggers and some construction going on, but it's an exciting time for the club as they move forward and allow more people into the stadium to watch the mighty Exeter Chiefs in the upcoming season. Gareth, Steeno, thank you for joining us today. Really delighted to be with a club legend. I've got lots of questions to ask you to try and pick your brains on some of the elements that we talk about on our show around leadership and coaching and success ultimately, and how you achieve that. Let's start with your time at the club. You've been here a long time. You've seen a lot of success over lots of years, and there have been lots of players come and go in that time. Try and summarise what you think some of the keys are to that sustained success over all that time.
I think I suppose the biggest thing was the club has always had a goal to achieve, but it never was unachievable. So I think the first day when I first came to the club, it was very much right. It was about establishing ourselves to get into the Premiership. So it was taking that small step. So I think the best thing we've ever done is we've never went too far ahead. I think like I said, when I first came, it was about becoming a Premiership team. Once we'd achieved that, then it was about establishing ourselves as a Premiership team. And then once you were established, it was, right, we're going to try and go top six.
Yeah.
And it was about building as you went. It wasn't about, right, this year, especially when we got to the Premiership initially, it was like, right, we're not going to win the league this year. Yeah. We're not going to win the league the year after. It was very much a sustained sort of building process. And I think if you can get that round your head, pretty early, we were always specific in what our goals were for each year, and I think you can get ahead of yourself and go, oh well, I've seen it, in the past. Some other clubs have definitely went and said straight away they've come in and we're going to go win this and that and the other, and you're kind of a little bit, okay, yes, that might be the goal in years to come, but and I'm not saying that's completely out of the realm of possibility. It can happen. You look at Leicester City, what happened with them in the football. But again, what has happened to them since? So you can kind of go, you want to try and build something and put something in place that's going to, survive over a number of years. And I think that's probably the best thing. We probably put a plan together, and that I only ever was part of the plans that were that as a player you're always that little bit that's just in front of you, that particular season. Yeah. Whereas probably whenever I was playing, the coaches were probably looking a 5, 6, 7 year, whatever year plan. Yeah. But that was never really put to us as players because that would have put an awful lot of pressure on you. And ultimately we were just about performing, and I think, it's about getting that little bit right at the start, having achievable goals, but obviously not capping your goals as such. Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear you go straight to setting goals, and those goals being enough of a stretch, but also realistic, and getting that right must be tough in the first place. How much involvement did you have in that as a player? Is that a discussion that's open? Are the goals put to you, or are you part of building them?
No, you build them. And I think, again, especially, I always think back to that group that we had that one promotion. There was a realistic group in there. It was a hard-working group, and probably not disrespecting any of the lads, and whenever I said that, we knew what our game plan was. We knew how to win games and how to sustain ourselves. We knew what it would take to get out of the Championship. Would that team have won the Premiership? Ultimately it wouldn't, with the game plan that it had and the way it was built. But it was done to achieve what it needed to achieve. And as we've went over the years, we've just established a different way of playing. You bring different characters in, different personnel, style of rugby, the way it's probably changed over the years as well. So, that was the most important thing. I think that's just putting the right places and achievable goals are really important to have, because the last thing you want is if you're not achieving your goals, then things start to spiral maybe the opposite direction.
It's a really important part of any group's forward movement, isn't it? I'm interested to hear about how the environment's changed over the years as well, because you talk about that team coming into the Premiership, getting promoted in, not necessarily would have gone on to win the Premiership. And I think everybody would agree with that. But it's not just bringing in better players who are more skilled at rugby, or perhaps have got, I don't know, more resilience and can deal with more pressure and play in front of bigger crowds and more experience. It's about environment as well. And I'm guessing there are tools and elements of the day-to-day and the support infrastructure around the team that's moved on a fair bit since you started at the club.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I think that's the way of the whole sport. And any sport has really went that way, hasn't it? But I think for us, again, it was like we just built on little things. We had very specific, like we only had, I think back to whenever we were here, I think we talked about ACE was a big thing. Just attitude, commitment, and ultimately enjoyment. Yeah. And the biggest one that came out was the players talked about having an enjoyment. So if you were able to enjoy your day-to-day basis and enjoy being in each other's company, I think the biggest thing as well was when I go back to that group, we said, look, we're going to have some harsh lessons along the way. I remember going out there and taking some real hammerings, but we would have been better coming out the other side of it because we've now had those experiences. Like I'd never played Premiership rugby before. I think at the time we only had about 3 lads who ever had. So as a group we were all the same, but we all had a belief about ourselves that we knew what we were doing at the time would work. And as you've kind of seen the club grow, the best thing that I really enjoy the fact is now we're seeing people who want to come to Exeter Chiefs, want to be part of the club. When I first came here, it was about using it as potentially somewhere to get somewhere else. And from where I'm from, it was very much if I could get the opportunity to go back and play in my homeland, that was something I thought of. But then once you got here, you kind of got the feeling of the place, and you didn't want to leave. And you've seen that now. We're very fortunate that we don't tend to turn over a lot of players. We're very good at bringing in maybe not the best player in the world, not like your marquee signing or. We're very good, and I think Rob and the coaching staff over the whole time that I've been here, they're very good at picking certain people who are going to fit our mould a little bit. And I think the other thing as well is you get with the guys that come in, they're very quick to, they obviously add value to the squad, not just at the field, but in the changing room on a day-to-day basis, but they buy into what we're about. And I think that is really important, that you recruit the person as much as getting the top class player.
Yeah, and so often a leader on the pitch. I'm guessing that's really helped you in your transition over to becoming kicking coach for the whole club. What is it about that leadership quality that you had on the pitch that supported that transition and that's got you thinking about how you become the best coach possible for the kickers across the club?
Well, I think that's. For me, being the position I played, naturally it was a thing. I was very fortunate that as a 10, you have to be a leader in the team, and I was part of the leadership group literally my entire time of being at the club. Rob always sort of said to me, you're like a quarterback, and he always talked about his 10 being that position. So, you have to sort of step up to it. I wouldn't say it came natural. Definitely at the start, it's like any, you kind of embed yourself, you kind of get a feeling. The biggest thing I always found was you kind of understanding what it meant to me. It was I was quite an emotional sort of bloke. I'd be very passionate about the club doing well, people around me achieving, and I felt if the team achieved, I would achieve, and everything would sort of snowball a little bit. And you kind of want to push everybody in the right direction to win things. And I was very much, I was very fortunate. I captained my national team at under 21 level. That was a good little bit of a bedding for me. I found that difficult. I definitely did, because the 4 provinces at home can be a little bit difficult at times, as you can imagine. But look, that was a good sounding board. But then to come in here, I probably didn't captain the side until maybe 5-6 years into the club. And I remember my first game as captain out here, we got beat by Sale Sharks, beat us in the Premiership by 50 points. So it wasn't looking good for me. But it was like another lesson. It was another experience. For me, it was always about just, in terms of transitioning, the position I played, you always felt of myself as a facilitator. As a good 10, as someone who brings the players into the game. And does the basics really well. It's something I've tried to do specifically nearly towards the end of my career, because I knew I wasn't the starter. So I was kind of almost trying to empower my knowledge that I'd had or my experiences. And I've kind of tried to do that again whenever I've transitioned across. And it hasn't been easy at times because you have to try and take yourself away, because I went from playing with a lot of these kids to 3 weeks later I was walking in, I was turning left to the coach's room, or I was turning right into the coach's room, and I was left a few weeks before. So it was about trying to slowly take myself away from the group a little bit, but still try and be part of it. So it's been interesting at times, but it's something that I obviously knew was coming, and I always really enjoyed the fact that I had great experiences, and I know that I can pass that on as best I can.
As you say, there's been a gradual, to a degree, transition from going from a starter to somebody who's maybe in a more supportive squad role into a coach over a number of years. But that transition is still a challenge, and you've touched on it a few times there. What have been the hardest bits for you? Because you go from being a player 1 week to a coach a few weeks later. You have to have a different mentality to be successful in that role. You've perhaps got conversations that you wouldn't have had as a player before. They're all new things and new challenges to overcome. What would have been some of the hardest things in that transition?
Oh, there's been loads. I think even the first.
How long have you got?
the first day even walking in, I'm turning into the coach's room. So straight away, these are people who, whenever you're a player, are in power, and even having those kind of conversations, listening in on different conversations that you were never privy to before. You're now in the room and you're hearing it. I find that fascinating. And more just seeing the way it sort of works and how not too dissimilar the two are between the players' room and the coach's room. It's
interesting.
It's at the end of the day, a lot of those guys have played as well, so they're ex-players. So I suppose that was difficult. The other aspect is I've kind of went from knowing at the end that I was finishing, so I kind of, like I was saying, I was taking that step back, but almost trying to take like a mentoring role with a lot of the younger lads as I was coming out. I always felt near the end, especially, that I was almost like a coach on the field when I was playing. Which was quite nice, because especially the last couple of games I got to play, I was playing in arguably the young team that was playing in the midweek. That was some of the most fun games of rugby, and of all the rugby games I've played, my last 2 games when we beat Northampton and beat Bristol away were probably up there with some of the best games I've played, in front of nobody, but with all the young guys. And that was really, I got a buzz out of that, and that's what I've tried to bring in when I'm here. I don't want to, I was very quick to know that I went from being very experienced to being very novice very quickly, and I wasn't going to go in. I wanted to learn as much, take as much as I can, and I feel now I can express my feelings a little bit more. The more I have more thoughts on the game, I'm more happy to share them now than before. I'd have been a bit like, oh, hang on, shouldn't I be? And I think that's been the biggest thing, really, is being able to just embed and find my spot, and hopefully now I can push on forward.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you go from being at the end of a playing career where you've kind of had all the experience, and not that there's nothing left to learn, but you've learned a lot of it, going into a new role where you're back learning at the beginning of your journey again, and there's a transition there for you at a personal level, which I find fascinating. So it'd be really interesting to see that journey. How would you describe your approach as a coach and the mentality you're taking into that role? Are there things that you're doing differently to kicking coaches before, or are you trying to approach it in a similar way and keep consistency?
Well, I've never had a kicking coach in my life, so it was only ever myself. So that isn't really, I haven't really taken anything from that. I suppose, you get to this point. I've been very fortunate. I haven't had a lot of coaches because I've been here for so long, and it was the same coaching staff, and I think that has been massive. Another big reason why the club has been successful. It's never really been a chop and change. It's been very much a steady growth with the same people in place, and building that sort of success. And from my point of view, it's very much like I'm kind of trying to mirror myself a little bit on what they've done, because I've never really seen anything else, and
it works.
Well, it does work, and I've been very fortunate. I've went away and I've done stuff with the under-18s, and just being in with them and seeing them and how they operate, and just giving them a couple of little things that we would do maybe here that might help them, and just see their growth as well. So I'm very much, I've been here for so long, so it's difficult to say what happens in another club, what happens here. I can only go by what I'm seeing, but I would just trying to be given as much of my experiences that I've had, that hopefully guys can feel comfortable to come and approach me because I've played with some of them. You know, so that would be, I don't want to be empowering, I don't want to be, I'm not at that point yet.
Yeah, no, you're a long way to go before that.
Yeah.
What sort of information do you have to use going, because it's a new role, so it's not like, as you said, the blueprint isn't there, you're not copy and pasting, you're going in and you're building. I'm guessing there's an instinctive thing that you do with kickers, which is, you know, watch them kick, give feedback live on you know, in the moment, work with them on mentality, all those sorts of things, because that's, you know, it's a big part of kicking, isn't it? When you're a minute to go and 2 points down and you've got a penalty, you've got to have the right mentality. But I guess there's more than just being there in the moment with them. There's looking at data and maybe some analytical thinking around the how and the why, and the information that you need to do your job well has to be there for you. What are the sorts of things that come into that conversation for you at the moment as you build this role out?
Yeah, well, again, you do a lot of it. Obviously, now there's a lot of video analysis of everyone. I try to look at it from what I would appreciate.
Yeah.
And yes, there's a lot of video you can look at and specific things, but you can get over analyze yourself, especially when it comes to kicking. Kickings can be, it's the same whenever it comes to line out throwing, or, you know, it's a closed skill.
Yeah.
And especially at our level, the guys, whether it be the academy guys or right through these kids and the girls that we have working here, you know, they're obviously at a level to begin with, or they wouldn't be here. You know, so it's about just honing that. And I think what I learned, especially over the years, and probably more so towards the end of my career, was I used to base a lot of my games on the fact that if I missed 2 or 3 kicks at goal, that was probably how I'd performed. I was like, I've had a bad game. Then you look back at it and you know, won by 30, 40 points, but that's what I would have based it on.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of things, it's about being a lot, what I've tried to pass on to especially to our younger guys, is like, be happy to miss. You know, it's almost like if you're confident missing, you can park it and move on to the next thing. And I think that's the biggest thing with, it's how you approach that. So I've talked to them whenever we do kicking sessions, you know, there's a lot of guys want to go out and hit 100%, and I'm like, great, you hit 100%, no problem, you buy the coffee, I'll buy the coffee. But if you miss one, you know, how are you going to get back on the horse? And you'll be buying me the coffee. So it's just about, you know, obviously you can watch as much video and all that sort of stuff. I think with a closed skill, there's certain times that it's needed. There's certain times you definitely need to sit down and go, actually, am I in the right place here? But sometimes you can overthink things. Yeah. I always like thinking about the golf analogy. Like I'm loving golf at the minute, but now I'm thinking about my swing and how I'm holding my hands and how the club's hitting the ball. You know, like all of a sudden I'm kind of getting into the mold that I don't want to be, or just be natural a little bit. So, yes, there's definitely a place for it, but I think that's more specific when it comes to actually playing and analysing opposition and stuff.
It's really interesting that you touched on something there around almost the clarity in your mind as you go up to kick a ball, and as you practice the skill that we can overthink it, and there's this mentality that we can overcoach and we can overtrain and we can overthink as we go up to do something, and sometimes allowing people or facilitating an environment where they can be clear, where their mind can be free of the anxiety, the worry, the over processing. And I'm guessing your role now is not just about, can I make you physically a better kicker, but can I give you the environment that allows you to go on and be successful? How much planning do you have to do around that? Is that something you're thinking about at the moment as you go into this, that you know, you've got to give people that right mentality as well as the physical skills? Yeah,
no, loads. I think at the minute that's what the difference is between a top, well, I think with an international player and your club player, even your professional player who's running out here, and the fella who's playing, you know, I don't know, at Red Roof or wherever it is, I think the difference is just those top 2 inches. You know, I always talked about it a lot, you know, everyone can be as good athletes, but what makes the top player different? You know, it's got to be that little bit extra. Willing to go that extra bit. And I think, like I said before, it's being comfortable to make a mistake and move on to the next thing, because there is no such thing, promise me, of a perfect game. And even if you were talking about the kicking world, if you've hit 100% out of 100%, I can guarantee not every single one of them went down the middle. So it's you know, it's about being able to park those and move on to the next thing. And it's definitely a big part of the game at the minute. Just if you feel confident, you tend to be, or if you're enjoying what you do, you tend to be good at it. You know, and we want our lads running around with smiles on their faces. Now there's a time and a place where you've got to
course.
get the nitty-gritty done. But I'd like to think that our lads are in a place now when it gets tough that they're actually enjoying it and smiling and getting on with it. So the mental aspect of the sport at the minute is huge. To drive forward and I think you can give guys environments, give them little challenges, little tests, little things. Ultimately, I'll come back to what I would have wanted. Yeah, that's what I'm kind of like. I can only say what I want to do, but I would never say someone else. That's the right thing for you, but I can only empower that to people.
And I'm sure the coaching team are strong of having somebody who's so connected to the team so recently as well. So it'd be really interesting to see how that discussion and how you're able to bring people into the dressing room and understand it. Although it feels like, certainly from talking to Rob as well, the conversation between players and coaches is very aligned and very transparent. So there's obviously not a challenge there. We've touched on leadership a lot, and leadership is obviously one of the most important things that leads to any sort of success in any environment. What is it about this club and the leadership at this club? It just feels like there's a little spark, a little something magical there in the leadership team, and yes, Rob and other people as well, but you're stepping into that team. It must be pretty inspiring. I'm keen to see whether you've got your finger on, have you been able to identify what is it about leadership at this club that really helps it be so successful?
I think there's just a lot of us, and at different levels. I think that's, even right to the top, right from Tony Rowe down. Like if you look at Tony, he's very close to the players. He's not like hidden away. So after every game, he's there, which is really important. Rob as well is very accessible. The other good thing with Rob is we know that he's been on the field, he's done it how many times. So he brings that element. And if you look around the rest of the coaching team, for instance, Ali Heifer, Rob, Hunter, these guys, Ricky Pello, Hayden Thomas, they've all played and all been leaders in their group. So, Ali being an X10, Rob's been running lineouts for years. So you just put those guys in place and there's just that sort of trust between them, and it's about empowering the players as well. We've had numerous guys in the leadership group since I've been here. Guys have stepped in, guys have stepped out, but just because they step out doesn't mean they're not leaders. So they've got all that ability, and there's a lot of experience right amongst the team. We've got the Scottish captain here, for instance. We've got Heineken Cup winners all over the place, vice captains of international teams. And then you've got guys who've come from under-20s who maybe captain their team, and you kind of just throw it round, and there's leaders all over the place. And I think the great thing as well, the guys, is they're not afraid to voice their opinions. If they're not happy with something, they're going to say, and if they are happy with it, we're quick to say that things are good. And I think just being able to be open and stuff, and obviously you need people who are not just always, you don't need people talking all the time, and you need some people to follow, and you get that in all aspects of every way of life. But the fact we have a lot of leaders around the group, but the leaders are happy to be led at times as well. So it's just, it just seems to work well, it gels well. It's been something that just hasn't happened overnight, but it's a good place to come in, and the fact that we will always challenge each other, and I think that's what breeds success.
I'm just going back to the point before that we were talking about kickers, and you talked about having a perfect game and getting it, even if you get 100%, they're still not in the centre. Isn't it interesting that Tens and other people who are kicking, it's so defined by those moments, yet you can have 75 minutes of a game, you're running around, passing, facilitating plays, doing everything else that contributes to a win or a loss, that arguably are having a bigger contribution. Is that kind of conversation happening? Obviously, you're looking at kicking success in your role, but I'm guessing you're looking at the game around that as well, and helping people to realise that those are key moments, but there's so much more that you can do to influence the success on the field, but also the club generally successful.
Oh yeah, well on the field, for instance, that was my role. My role was to kick goals. That was one of my roles. My other role was to make the team tick, get the attack going. So the lads who win the penalty for you, they've done their job. So if the scrum doesn't work and they don't win that penalty for you, I don't get to do my job. So it kind of works in roundabout. The biggest thing I always noticed was, I got a lot of plaudits for championship finals and the Prem final we won where I've kicked a penalty in the last minute of the game, but I wasn't the one pushing and winning the scrum penalty.
No.
You know, so that was their job. So if I missed my kick, I haven't done my job yet. That wouldn't be remembered what they did. So, you know, one doesn't work without the other. So I always had it in my head that these guys have done that. I've got to now step up and do my role.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest part, really, about those sort of things. And you're talking about 100% here and there. And, you know, it doesn't always work like that. And I think in terms of, you know, in around the club, that's one of the biggest things pushed us successfully as well.
Yeah, and now you've ventured away from rugby to a degree as well, with going into to business in the recent years, and Standoff Bar in Exeter. What do you see entering into that world and being in rugby at the same time? What are the big differences when you look at things like how to be successful in business versus rugby, or how to be a great leader in business versus rugby? Are there obvious differences, or is it all translatable?
Well, once again, I was a novice in that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, to me, they're pretty similar. You know, it's about, especially when I think of the standoff, it's about getting the right people in place, the right team, the right people doing the right job. You know, me going in as a chef was never going to be something. You know, so it's about hiring the right people to do the right thing. It's like, again, you know, it's like, would we have Luke Cowan-Dickey kicking goals? We might do. He's actually quite good at it, but he's generally quite good at it. But again, would you have that? It's about putting the right people to do their certain roles, and then about being passionate about something as well. You know, you've got to drive something, and there's definitely been some challenges, obviously, with that world, especially what's happened with COVID and everything. You know, we probably, I would say, the first 15 months of being in the business, just prior to COVID, there were, you know, by no stretch of the imagination, easy. And there was some really difficult conversations at difficult times. And the three of us that are in the place, obviously, Carl Rimmer being another one, an ex-player as well, you know, and our other business partner, you know, we had a lot of experience in that field. And we definitely had some really difficult challenges, and we probably actually got to a really good point, and then COVID hit. We were kind of just getting established to where we wanted to be. We were getting this good food was coming out, you know, a good atmosphere, party atmosphere after games. You know, it just seemed to be the right thing, and then COVID hit, closed us all down, and we've had to start again from afresh. And then obviously with the hospitality industry, what's happened, just that whole coming back and closing again, and the challenges with it. You know, it's been sleepless nights, don't get me wrong. And I always wanted it to be a bit of fun, and thinking that it ended up being quite hard. But we're now in a really good place. We've got a good team in place now, who are excited, a young group who are going out there and they're driving the place forward. It's very similar to here. We've now got a young group of guys who are driving this place forward, and that's just infectious when you see that. And it's just about putting the right people in place and empowering them to take over and let them go, and you know, pushing it.
One more question, if that's okay. You've mentioned a number of times about what you've picked up from failure, the lessons that you've learned, and how, you know, if that hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened, and I lost that game, but actually I remember it, and it's helped me to go on and do this. What's the process for that? Is there a conscious process around you lose a game, or you lose a final, or you have a period of time in business where the chips are down and things don't go your way? You can either let that beat you and be the beating of you, or you can use it to go on and push forwards and be successful. I'm guessing there's something that happens in your brain as an elite athlete previously, and now as, you know, somebody who's going to be coaching elite athletes, that helps you to harness that and move forward with a failure and the lessons learned from it.
Oh yeah, you're not going to get everything handed to you. I suppose. I always put my rugby career out there. I was always basing my rugby career on I got to prove people wrong, because I was always told, you know, the experiences I've had from when I started at 18 years of age. I used to look around the room, and this guy was getting a contract, that guy was getting a contract, and I was going, I'm doing all I need to do here, but I'm getting nowhere. And I was told I was too slow, I was too heavy, whatever it was, and that kind of was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. It was like, even at the end, they were sort of saying to me, you can't defend, you can't tackle. So I went, right, well, I'm going to practice tackling every single day, and probably by the end of my career I could actually tackle all right. I was confident doing, but it was more just doing repetition of it. And it was about proving people wrong. And even I laughed with Rob literally, because in lockdown he rang me and just said about finishing off the career and stuff, and he said, just so you know, now that you're the age you're at and you've got so many weeks left, you've got to train harder now over this lockdown period. You've got to be training harder than when you were 25.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying that, going, and he goes, he doesn't think I can do that. And I went off and lost like 8 kilos and got myself in probably the best physical nick of my life, and I only had 3 months left in my rugby career. So again, I was just that flip that I'm going to prove him wrong, that I can actually do that. And it's just probably been a mentality that I've had my whole life, right from whenever I was a kid. I was always, my biggest thing was I always wanted to prove everybody at home wrong. Yeah. All those years ago, and it's one of the proudest moments that I had was whenever Ulster Rugby obviously turned me down, and I remember going home crying for a couple of days, not knowing what I'm going to do, and I ended up, long story short, I ended up here, won the Heineken Cup, and I can still remember 2 years ago being brought home to Ulster Rugby, being shown around this great place. Gareth would like you to come home and sign a contract, and we'll get 2 years playing here and all this. One of the greatest experiences, and I'm more than happy. I've said it before, but to be able to tell them no, I'm at a club that's better. Yeah. It gives me goosebumps even thinking about that. So that was what my whole career was based on. In terms of business world, you've got to. Nobody gets it their own way, and if you look at most of the successes that people have been in business, they've probably been bankrupt at some point. Yeah. So, and it's their choice then. Do we sit there or do we get up and go again? Yeah. And I'm sure they won't make those mistakes again. So it's like this now, stepping into the coaching world, I'll make plenty of mistakes, and hopefully I'll learn from it and get better for it.
Yeah, and you're in the right place to be making those mistakes because you've got the environment and the culture that will allow for it and that will seemingly support you through making those mistakes and allow you to make them and learn from them by the scenes of things.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. It certainly feels that way.
It certainly does.
Sino, thank you. Really, really love talking to you today. Thank you for being so honest and open with us and for sharing your experiences, and best of luck with the coaching role. I'm sure you'll make a huge difference to the kickers right across the club.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.